Hey everyone, this is the Undying Nephilim, the creator of Hyrule Total War, and I'm here today with a little update of what I'm working on, and I'll show you a little bit of the process I go by to make my cinematics. So, I'm still working on the cinematic for the next level of Hyrule Historia. This particular part features Princess Ruto. I've spent about a week on this one segment, and I just finished it last night. So I believe now I'm going to show a bit of the pipeline I used to make these cinematics and give everyone a general idea of how I construct them and how I come up with them and how I put them together and ultimately render them. First up, I write down the dialogue, and then I send it off to several of my friends and other individuals for proofreading and just to check it out and make sure nothing's particularly terrible. And then after that's sort of finalized, I'll jot down storyboards and I'll box in things like camera angles and get a general sense of the animation and what I'm going for in each particular animation. Most of my storyboards are really sketchy and are not detailed at all. For the purpose of this video, I made this one a little more legible for the viewers so you could sort of see it better and it's a little more professional. On average, my storyboards are literally nothing more than extremely vague gestures and blobs, and they're really simplified. For example, this mess of scribbles I have on the screen here eventually turned into this animation here. So for my own personal stuff, I don't go into too much details on storyboards. I just, record what's necessary for me to understand. After I have the storyboards down, I bring all of my models and everything into Maya. Assuming all the models are complete, I can usually just start animating immediately, but sometimes, I need to make a model for a particular scene or a level. In this example, I had to model the entire city that this level takes place, and that can add a tremendous amount of time to each cinematic. But the good news is once the model's done, they can, be used forever and I don't have to model them again. So once I actually do start the process of animating, the first thing I do is really sort of just vague, generalized gestures, nothing particularly detailed, mostly just so I can get the timing of the scene down, because timing is really important in animation. This part of the process can, it can take up to several days. It's not a particularly long part of the process. The next part is usually what ends up taking most of the time. After the timing of everything feels about right and everything's just sort of boxed in and all of it's going well, then I start to add in all the details. And this is the process of the animation, other than rendering, that basically murders all of my time. Adding in details, in particular for things like fight choreography, anything with a lot of movement or momentum, it can take anywhere from 4 days to over a week just to do a single fight scene. Thankfully, I've gotten a lot faster at making those sorts of scenes in the last 6 months, and I found tools and other things to help speed up the process. In particular, when there's many characters on screen at once fighting each other, I have several tools and processes that help me keep that from getting out of control as far as time consumption goes. After all the detailed movements in a scene are taken care of and most of the primary animation is done, I'll move into things like secondary animation. So things like eyes blinking, mouth movements, earrings bobbing around, just, small details in secondary animation. So after all the details are in the primary and secondary animations, I'll add in any sort of background animation, such as armies clashing in the distance or multiple characters doing things. And usually this part of the animation doesn't need to be too detailed because it's kind of distant, and the viewer will only really pick it up in their peripheral vision. They won't really see it in much detail. So this part of the process, even though there can be, hundreds of animated things going on in the background. It doesn't take as long as the rest of the process because the animations are usually a little more vague because they don't need to be particularly detailed. And then comes my probably my least favorite part of the entire process, and anyone else who does animation for a living or does anything in this realm can probably agree with me that rendering is just, it can be pretty terrible and it can take a really long time for a scene to render. I mean, it gives me the advantage of having time to kill and I can work on something else, but I get really impatient when I'm waiting for a scene to render, and it can take anywhere from a day to 48 hours just to render a scene that's only a minute to 2 minutes long. Thankfully, it's both a blessing and a curse, but Medieval 2, the engine that I use, it clocks out at a certain resolution, which is a lot smaller. So if you'll notice some of my videos for some of my other original properties, the resolution's actually a lot higher, and it's 16 by 9, whereas Medieval 2 is locked at a smaller resolution. So all my animations for Hyrule Total War render a lot faster than my other ones, but even then, it can take a really long time to animate something, especially when there's hundreds of characters running around doing things, or there's just a lot of things going on in a scene. After everything has taken an eternity and a half to render, I bring everything I've rendered into Adobe After Effects, and I start compositing the entire scene, multiple scenes together into one large cohesive scene. And I'll add in, post effects. I'll color correct, I'll make the contrast a little better. I'll add in effects like ripples in the water or fog or smoke. And I'll generally just add in a bunch of little details that I prefer to do in After Effects as opposed to Maya to complete the scene. This process doesn't take me too long. It's one of the faster parts of animating. So doesn't get nearly as crazy as, rendering. Even if the scene's particularly huge, I can usually stamp out this process in about a day or two, depending on how big the scene is or how many things are going on. Once all the visuals for a scene are finalized, or I'm reasonably happy with how they've turned out, all I do after that is add in sounds and things of that nature, music, and that part also doesn't take me too long. Usually I can knock out all the sounds of a scene in an afternoon. Sometimes, depending on how long the scene is, it can spread on to a second day, and it can take up to 24 hours to do. But it's a process I enjoy compared to some of the other ones, particularly because it's not as maddening and it doesn't take nearly as long. And there you have it. That's pretty much the process I used to create all of the cinematics for Hyrule Total War. That's only, half of the aspect of creating the game. There's the entire other aspect, which is actually, making the models and texturing them and getting them into the engine and crossing my fingers and hope that it doesn't cause a crash. Maybe one day I'll make a video on that part of the process. I just have to find a way to make it visually interesting because there's not really much of a visual aspect to getting things into Medieval 2 and basically programming them to work in the engine. And it's extremely tedious and boring and way worse than the animation process. But maybe I'll make a video one day on that part of it. So with that said, I'll let you guys take a look at this part of the animation. you guys for checking this out. If you'd like to support the creation of this game, you can check out my Patreon. I have links below in the description. Every little bit helps. Subscribe and give the video a like if you enjoyed what you saw, and I'll see you guys next time.